Hello and welcome. I have something very special for all of you today. Sir, You Are Being Hunted has had an update. Den of Thieves Games has licensed Sir, You Are Being Hunted and has given us a great gift. And I have one of the people responsible for this update here with me to answer some questions about this update and about the future of Sir and about love and life and general philosophy. And that is the lead programmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wijning. I worked on the patch 1.5 as the project lead.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Den of Thieves, and I'll get a game started for us.
As a studio, we really focus on technology and taking great games and just making them better and just overall improving them. Take out the bad, improve the good, and just make better experiences.
Have you ported any other games as a company?
Yes, I have. Before I started Den of Thieves, I worked for a company called Sedesco Publishing. The biggest ones were a game called Defunct on Nintendo Switch and a game called Among the Sleep, also on Nintendo Switch.
I want to get into the update. First of all, I mean, you're seeing it right
Sure.
now. It is beautiful. The graphics update is incredible.
Thank you.
You can see detail that you couldn't see before. Like, I've been noticing as I've been playing the update that the smoke is much clearer. You can see it from further away, which is a big advantage. Pathing with the AI, it seems to be better. It's gonna challenge me in different ways as a speedrunner. The time save for generating a new world, that's a huge quality of life improvement. That's mostly to say thank you.
I'm happy to oblige. The reason it's running so much faster is because we switched to new version of the engine, and we also switched to a different scripting backend, one that is much faster. As a result, the game runs so much smoother than it did before. And it's not just the loading times, it's the entire game. And, in particular, the generation of world, it just flies, right?
Yeah.
In some cases, it's 10 times as fast. In other cases, it's 4 times as fast. But either way, that's pretty significant, I think. Yeah, the frame rate was always pretty good. I mean, after all, it is a game from 2014, so
Right.
modern hardware doesn't really struggle with it so much. But the game did suffer from lag spikes, and we solved quite a few of those. Oh, you're going straight in there.
Yep. Yeah. I don't have an axe yet, so we're just gonna go for it. Your goals for the update. What was your kind of trajectory for this update?
So the number one rule of porting a game and making a good port is that it is all about preserving the original intent, not necessarily the original game itself, right?
Sure.
Because code sometimes has to change, code breaks in unexpected ways, sometimes the art has to be modified slightly, but that is all okay as long as the intent is still there, right? The original vision, that's what it's all about. Is we wanted to have, I guess, kind of like a last send-off of this game, basically in a way where it was technologically updated to current year 2021. So it would kind of have a fresh coat of paint, but it wouldn't really be any different. It would just be closer to the originally intended vision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes
that's
a lot of
really
sense.
just what we went for. We just kind of wanted to spruce it up and make it new again without changing what makes it so special.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It kind of holding to the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law type thing.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about how Jim Rossignol, the owner of the game, has been involved in the development.
Actually, there were a couple of things where he always wanted to change them, or they just didn't look right in the final patch. And a good example of this is the smoke plumes that you mentioned earlier. The way they looked in patch 1.4, they're not supposed to look like that, right? They're supposed to be a lot brighter. And they look a lot brighter now in patch 1.5. And, we did have a couple of sessions where I just sat down with him and, I'd screen share and we just kind of go through the game together. And it's like, okay, so how is it supposed to look, right? Is this right? Or should we change it a little bit? Or here's variant A, B, C. What you're looking at, that is what the assets were intended to look like. They were just being rendered incorrectly.
I have noticed that some of the glitches where I'd end up inside of a building have been fixed. It's not something I used very often as a strategy in a run, And it actually seems to help even a little bit, because occasionally I'd get stuck inside of things, and that seems to kick me back out of it much faster. So that's actually kind of a nice change.
With the engine upgrade also comes an upgrade of the underlying physics system. It's not really something that crossed our mind when we worked on it, but sometimes these things just work themselves out. 1, 2, bring it to the 4.
So did you have much experience with Sir before deciding to port it?
Yeah, so I bought it while it was still in development, while it was still in early access. When I started development, I think I played for another 10 to 20 hours in playtesting and a couple hundred hours in development so far.
Was there something particular about Sir itself that drew you to it as an option for porting?
Definitely the atmosphere, right? The game's graphics, well, the game never really had great graphics to begin with. It was a choice that the developers made at the time to keep costs down. But even though the graphics aren't, hot necessarily, the game still has a very specific mood. And yes. It is in that regard very unique, right? That you have this stealth survival type gameplay combined with the procedural generation, combined with this specific mood. And, not to mention the tweet punk art style. It is definitely very unique, and there's not a whole lot of games out there in general, and definitely not on Switch. So I think it's a very obvious game that should be on a platform like that, and definitely belongs there, I think.
This is kind of risky. I probably shouldn't be doing this. Oh, okay. Paid off, though. Paid off. Good.
Yeah, you got an axe, but you're bleeding now.
Yep.
Do you have any bandages?
I do. I'm gonna get away before I use one, I think.
Yeah, definitely. When I play games, I like to I like the exploration aspects. A lot of games that I've played for many hours are these types of games with large open worlds. Not even mainstream ones sometimes, and I just like driving around and walking around and checking out the place. And I think. With Sir, it came out in this era when there were procedurally generated games, but it was kind of the first one that had graphics that weren't, Minecraft style, voxel, super blocky, and were also procedurally generated. And it wasn't the first, of course it wasn't, but there wasn't really anything else like it at the time. And
were there any surprises that you found in the code as you went?
The source code of the game, it has some of the raw audio recordings of the voice actors in there, and those are hilarious. Very, very funny. The voice actor that did the dog is actually the same voice actor that does the narrator, Mr. Walters.
Yeah.
And it's literally just that guy going, woof, woof, barf, barf.
I mean... Yes, sorry. Are they bigger? Woof, woof, bark, bark. Bark, 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 growl, growl. You don't want me to howl as well, do you? Howl, howl.
Okay, so it's nowhere near as daft as the stuff we did for our last game, I promise you.
Right.
Okay. It was an office meme for a good week.
You speedrun games? I mean, I'm interested in speedrunning. I'm not sure. It's not everyone is, which is perfectly fine.
I do like watching speedruns, but I've never really been serious into speedrunning myself. I mean, I don't know if it counts, but I know that Portal 2 has like a built-in speedrunning thing. I think I ran a couple of levels in there, but I never did any serious speedrunning myself. But I do watch them from time to time.
What games are you currently playing in your free time?
My top 3 games that I kind of rotate between are Batman Arkham City, The Saboteur, which is an old game by EA. It's about blowing things up. And Mirror's Edge. I like that game a lot as well. Mirror's Edge has an internally consistent world. I'm not sure if you're aware. I actually went through the trouble of taking the camera in free cam mode in every single level, screenshotting it from the top down, and then in Photoshop kind of compositing all the maps together. And it turns out that not only is the city itself size-wise consistent, not only that, stuff like the metro lines line up as well.
I do also want to talk a bit about the Reinvented edition that's also been announced with this update.
Anyway, back on topic.
I know that was an abrupt segue. I feel inadequate in my Mirror's Edge knowledge, so I'm shying away from it. So
Reinvented edition.
Reinvented, yes. So I am beyond excited about this, and
Very
I'm
happy to hear that.
Yeah, I'm really curious what types of things are being reinvented in the game.
I mean, the short answer is that we're going to massively increase the amount of customizability that you have in a game. The long answer is that we want to do that through a system that we internally refer to as traits.
Okay.
Basically, the way we view it is that when you generate a new world, you're going to have an option for going through a list of traits, right? And a trait can be pretty much anything. For instance, right now what you have in the game, there's a class system, right? You can play as a noble, or you can play as an officer, and you start with a bunch of guns, etc., etc. You get to pick one trait in this category of classes, and that's your starting inventory. But then above that, there's going to be other traits as well. And one of the things that I'm really adamant about changing in this game is the movement system. For a movement system that is a lot more mobility based, has a little bit of a higher skill ceiling, and generally just is a little bit smoother and a little bit nicer. And that has some options to it as well.
Yeah.
Sorry. But given that, you know, it's very subjective thing whether or not you like something like that, the movement system itself will also be a trait, right? So you can just choose to not have it enabled, and then you just end up with the old movement system.
Okay.
Some of the things that we want to work on is the gunplay, right? The shotgun is pretty good, but it could be better. It has a very randomized scatter pattern, and I know that at the time randomized scatter pattern were very popular, but I think it's time to have something that's a little bit more consistent and that feels a little bit chunkier. The rifle is a very good weapon. It's very precise. It's very accurate. But I think one thing that's really missing from the gun is bullet drop. So we've been working on implementing ballistic model internally to the rifle, right? And there's going to be a lot of tweaks like that are very subjective, and it's very much like, okay, so some people want to have this and other people may not. So in that case, we can just kind of wrap it around in a trait and just give the players the choice and the freedom to pick which one they think are good and best, and the ones that they don't want, they can just disable those. Yeah, and of course, there's going to be a lot of very obvious stuff that can be implemented this way, like a permadeath/roguelike mode, which I think is the game is sorely lacking as well.
Yeah, that'll be really great for, I think, the speedrunning aspect, to be able to create different interesting ways to play the game, to kind of challenge yourself. I was wondering if the procedural generation aspect of the game presented any particular problems as you were either working on the update or the remake.
Well, you know how there's like this little like family magic trick where you have like a set table with a tablecloth on it, and you know you have your plates and your forks and your cups and whatever. And the challenge is to pull out the tablecloth from underneath the table, right?
Yeah.
And changing the engine of a game this old is sort of like having to pick up the tablecloth with everything on it, moving it off the table, and then putting it down on another table. Basically everything breaks, right? So when we initially imported this, nothing worked. We had to reassemble the whole thing from scratch. We made a conscious effort to keep the game as close to the original gameplay as possible, intentionally kind of keeping things the way they were, with the goal of having a patch that even the purist would like, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not up to me to decide if a certain gameplay change is good or bad. So we just try to stick to as much like technical fixes and bug fixes as possible, right? Not really taking gameplay into account.
Can we expect different types of robots, new robots in the Reinvented edition?
So the game is still in development, so obviously things change as development goes on. But I think specifically with adding robots, it's a thing where, from a design perspective, you very easily get into a position where you completely throw the mix and the balance of the gameplay out of whack.
Sure.
I think from another perspective, there is a lot of enemy variety already in the game. but the game could do a better job of actually having you engage with AIs other than the hunters. The poacher AI is definitely present in the game, but you very rarely encounter one. And I think a lot of balancing and tweaking could be done there instead. Definitely, it's a bit of a difficult situation, right? That we call it Reinvented Edition, and we don't call it Fear Being Hunted 2, right? So it's kind of like in this position where it is sort of more than just a remaster, but it's also not quite a sequel. It's something else entirely, right? It's Surrey Being Hunted, but just completely reinvented. I think the healthiest thing going into Reinvented would be to expect essentially the same gameplay loop, but massively improved, right?
Okay.
With more mechanics and more customizability. Certain systems entirely overhauled, but the underlying system is still Sir Being Hunted, right? It's not a different game. It's not a sequel. It's just Sir completely reinvented.
That makes a lot of sense. I apologize. I'm being followed by a tremendous...
It does appear you are being hunted.
Yes, I am being hunted. I think... Oh, nope. I thought I lost him there. Oh, that guy hit the other guy. That's great.
I'm really curious to the public's reaction to the patch and the Reinvented Edition in general. We worked very hard on this, and I genuinely hope that people like it.
On a personal note, why get me, kind of someone who, has speedrun the game a little bit and has played it off and on since its release? Why get me involved, and how much are you regretting it now?
Well, I don't. I'm actually very happy to have you on board. I mean, definitely, for sure, you played the game a whole awful lot, right? You have a significant amount of experience with this game. And like I said before, we really wanted to make something that is for the community, first and foremost. And that is also something that even a purist would be happy with. And that also happened to know a whole lot about it. So that's why we involve people like you. And there's also General Red that we got involved in. General Red has 400 plus episodes of Let's Play on the game.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you want to have his input on the game. Like, why wouldn't you? I think there should be a little bit more of this cross communication between developers and the people that play it. Because at the end of the day, I'm not making a game to make me happy. I'm making a game to make other people happy.
I do want to give you one more opportunity. Anything else you want to share? Any shout outs?
Want to talk a little bit about the multiplayer?
Oh, yes.
The old multiplayer client will work with the new servers. You just have to direct connect to it, right? So if you know the IP address, then you can just direct connect to it using the old client. The new client for the multiplayer will not have any of these fixes that the single player has. It still runs in Unity 4, right? No gameplay fixes whatsoever. We just swapped out the master server component to make it work again. The multiplayer client is capable of running a server as well. The game already had this structure where servers were always dedicated, so you can't run a server in a client, you have to run it separately. And we're kind of enhancing that by also offering a dedicated server option that you can run from a command line. And we're going to be offering that for both Windows and Linux. And on top of that, as an alternative option, we'll also make sure that there is a Docker container that has the Linux version with basically zero overhead already in it, right? And with the current specs that we're targeting is it'll run on one CPU core with 1 gigabyte of memory. And that will be enough for a 64-tick 8-player server.
That's fantastic.
Even if somehow there's a problem with the server that needs to be fixed, you can just write your own master server, right? You don't need access to the source code to fix it. That's the main point of it. And that's just a nice thing to make sure that the game will be playable even 20 years from now.
I'm really excited for some multiplayer, this new energy and this new influx of players.
On the Friday, we actually had a Docker server running over like 4G internet, just so we could test over like an external IP. And that was remarkably playable over 4G. So I have a feeling it's going to be a very good experience.
I just want to say thank you to Wijning for joining me for this interview and for taking the time to answer my questions. I hope you guys are as excited as I am for this patch and for looking forward to the Reinvented edition. This is a lot of traction here, and I really appreciate what's happening in this community. Just a reminder, I am an internet monkey, and I do dance for likes, subscribes, and clicking that bell. So if you don't mind, as you exit this video, just clicking down there, that'd be fantastic. I appreciate it.